Hi everyone, today our lesson is going to be on the immune system, so let's start pronouncing some of the vocabularies before we start. They're going to be immune system, of course, lymph nodes, lymph vessels, leukocytes, neutrophil, basophil, eosinophil, lymphocytes, monocytes, and of course pathogens. So if you can pronounce these words out loud, it'll be great because it gives you a chance to pronounce them, and also you can learn to spell them before we start the lesson. Again, if you want, you can learn to spell them at the end of the lesson. So just a quick pronunciation guide: immune system, lymph nodes, lymph vessel, leukocytes, neutrophil, basophil, eosinophil, lymphocytes, monocytes, and pathogens. Alright, so far we've been talking about systems in the body, and we looked at the different systems and how they work together to make us alive. Some of the systems we looked at were the digestive system, where we were saying that their job or their main function is to break down food. We talked about the circulatory system that transports oxygen and nutrients to the mitochondria. We talked about the nervous system that transmits messages. We talked about the respiratory system that carries oxygen. Today we're going to talk about the immune system, and our immune system is actually very important because they protect our body. They protect us from bacteria, viruses, fungi, toxin, pollutant, or parasites. So basically it is a mechanism that all living things have so that it will protect the organism from getting a disease. So we do have a first line of defense, which is said to be the first thing that is protecting us from pathogens, and the major organ that protects us from pathogen is our skin. Our skin actually prevents the entry of microorganisms on a daily basis, and without our skin we would be exposed to all of these pathogens, and we can get sick really quickly. So our skin is one of the major first line of defense that is just there, and it stops microorganisms from coming in. Our saliva is another thing that protects us from pathogen. Tears, mucus lining, stomach acid, all of these things that are found on the external surface is there as a barrier, basically stopping anything from entering our body, and it is known as the first line of. So what happens if a microorganism or a pathogen do enter our body? Then we have a second line of defense. Our second line of defense is made up of white blood cells. And these white blood cells, also known as leukocytes, this is just a fancy word for white blood cell. Leukocytes, their job is basically to get rid of any type of bacteria, any type of fungi, toxin, anything that does enter our body, or a second line of defense, which is our white blood cell, will step in. Now these white blood cells are stored in small nodes in our body. These nodes are called lymph nodes, and the white blood cell is carried through to specific cells through vessels called lymph vessels. So again, just to recap, if a microorganism do enter our body, it will meet the second line of defense, which is our white blood cell. Our white blood cells are stored in lymph nodes and transmitted through the lymph vessel. Now there are many types of white blood cells. The first one that we're going to talk about is called neutrophil, and the neutrophil is very specific in a way that it works, that it will engulf whatever microorganism there is. Engulf means to eat it up. And anytime a cell or any type of cell eats up a microorganism, it is said to be phagocytic. So the phagocytic properties of neutrophil allow them to eat anything that enters our body. So let's look at this diagram right here. This is the cells of the skin. And these orange things here are microorganisms. If they do enter our skin, the neutrophil will go closely towards it and it will engulf it. Now, the bad thing about neutrophil is that once it engulfs the microorganism, it dies. And whenever it dies, it creates white substance oozing out called pus. So whenever you have a pimple and you see white substance coming out, basically you are having your neutrophil eating up whatever microorganisms are entering and releasing that pus when they die. A second type of white blood cell found in our second line of defense is eosinophils and basophils. The O here is silent. So eosinophils and basophils, they release chemicals. So they don't eat the bacteria or engulf the bacteria, they release chemicals. One of the most common chemicals that you probably would have heard of is called histamine. And whenever they see a microorganism, they release these histamines. Now sometimes your body detects false pathogen. That are things that are not really harmful to you, but still releases these chemicals called histamines. Now when histamines are released, they allow your body to, your blood vessels to expand. And when it expands, it causes swelling. Now, if, for example, a pollen enters your body and your basophils and eosinophils detects it as a pathogen, it will start reacting, spreading histamine. And that is why you will have allergic reactions sometimes to things that are not even pathogenic and things that are not dangerous to you, but your body is picking that up as a pathogen. So to combat that, there is a chemical called antihistamine that people normally take when they have allergies. And a third type of white blood cell that is involved in the second line of defense is your monocyte. And the monocyte, again, they engulf, this time, all the cells that are dead, all the bacteria that are dead, virus, whatever is there and they're dead, they kind of clean it up. They're like the cleanup group that eats all of those things up. So just to recap what the second line of defense is, say for example, a microorganism does get into your body, you have white blood cells. There are three of them. There's the neutrophil, there's the basophil, eosinophil, and the monocyte. And these cells, or white blood cells, tend to either engulf or eat the microorganism, or they release a chemical. Most likely that chemical will be histamine. So so the second line of defense brings about what is called an inflammatory response. Now, these neutrophils, these eosinophils, basophils, and monocytes, they will tend to rush towards where the microorganism is, and they will attack it. So, say for example, this is your skin. And this is your blood vessel, of course. I'm just going to draw cells making your blood vessels, and this is like red blood cells that are found flowing through. And I'm going to use this green to represent the white blood cells. So these are your white blood cells. These are your eosinophil, your basophil, your neutrophil, and your monocytes. So if, for example, there's an invasion and pathogens start entering your body, what will happen is that the blood vessel will tend to expand. So your blood vessels will expand, and there will be a larger space inside that allows these white blood cells to travel to the site of where the pathogen is. Once they detect the pathogen, then they could basically engulf it or use a histamine or a chemical, depending on the type of microorganism. Now, this is brought about by redness, swelling, and secretion of pus. And that is why when you have a pimple or something, you have a cut and there's microorganism, you will tend to see that your skin will swell because the blood vessels are increased, their size are increased, and also when the neutrophil, they die, they will secrete a white substance called pus. Alright, our third line of defense. Say for example there is something more specific. For example, there is a virus. Then what does our body do? Now there is a fourth type of white blood cell. This is called lymphocyte, and they are very specific. when I say they're specific, it means that they only attack viruses. So there are two types of lymphocytes. There is the helper B and the killer T. The helper B identify the virus. And how do you know that there is a virus? Because on the surface of virus, there are chemicals on the surface of viruses. And these chemicals are known as antigen, antigen. So whenever your helper B cells, they detect those antigen on the surface of viruses, they will release something. And what they release is called an antibody. The antibody will go and bind with the antibody will go and bind with the antigen, and then the killer T cell, now once it recognizes that, it will go and kill that antigen. So they kind of work together. That is the helper B and the killer T. The helper B identifies the virus by releasing an antibody when it recognizes an antigen on the surface of the virus, and then the killer T, once that recognition has been made, the killer T steps in and get rid of that virus. So just as a review, we have our immune system. We have our innate or natural immunity. That includes our first line of defense and our second line of defense. Our first line of defense includes the skin, the membranes, and so forth. Our second line of defense is our white blood cells, such as the neutrophil and the basophil monocytes, and they cause inflammation. And then we have our adaptive or acquired immunity. This is our third line of defense, and this is done by the lymphocyte, that is the killer B and killer T cell.